Tammy Stafford. I'm a broker owner of Advanced One Professional Real Estate, and I want to go over doing a purchase contract for a residential property with you today. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the MLS and pick a property that I'm going to want to write an offer on. And it's going to be this one right here on Windjammer or iJams in Stockton. So I got the MLS number, which is right here in the blue. So I can enter that in there for MLS Connect and do my offer much faster. So let's go back to Zip Forms. First thing you want to do is log into Zip Forms. Once Zip Forms opens up, you're going to want to click on New over here in the left-hand corner, and you're going to want to click on New Purchase. And that will open up a purchase contract for you, and it'll be a new one. I have templates done, which I can show you how to do that on another video, okay? And then over here under MLS Connects, I'm going to open that up. I'm going to choose my MLS. I'm going to enter the MLS number for this property. I'm going to click in the box to bring over a photo, and I'm going to tell it to find it. It will generate and find this listing, and then it will generate and populate over important information about this listing: list price, agent, the amount it's listed for, and so forth. So as you see, it's populated everything over. And then I click Use Listing because I want to use that listing. And then I click on Residential. And then my template updates. And here's my template that I would like to use. And then I click Save. And then that template is going to be there for me. And as you can see, here's the information from the MLS: property address, MLS number, the zoning on the property, and the list date of this property and the list price. So I'm going to go back up. I'm going to click on Documents to get to my templates. And here's my templates here. I have my templates right here. And I always do a cover sheet before I do my offer. So I take my cover sheet and I open that up. I put in the buyer's names so that it will auto-populate. And then I would put in an email address here. And then I would put in the other buyer, if there's another one. I'd put in their name. And then I'd put in their email address here. And that way you can send things to sign electronically. I put a check mark in each one of their boxes, so that check mark will show up on the area and location where they're supposed to initial and sign. And if you scroll down, you can see that it pulled over the MLS number, the property address, the APN number, and the list price. So I can scroll down and put in the purchase price in here and the agreement date. And then I can put in the amount of the deposit. We're not going to do an increased deposit or anything like that. Offer date is today. This offer, we're going to have it expire on the 2nd at 5 p.m. Okay, and then this is a residential property built in 2008. So at least we know we don't need the lead-based paint. I'm going to ask for Old Republic title for my buyer. And as you can see, I have it auto-populating my address and my information. And I do that to save myself some time. And then I put in my information. I put in my phone numbers. And I put in my email, address, cell phone number. I put all that stuff in here for the offer, so that stuff prints on the offer. And as you can see here, the listing brokerage is Advanced One Professional Real Estate, but it is a different agent. So this makes it a dual agency. This is going to be a conventional loan. And I don't fill out the appraisal or pest, but I do put in my disclosure source here. And then a home warranty. I always get my clients a home warranty. So then you go up here to the left, as you can see, and you click on Save. It has saved everything on that cover sheet, and everything that's on that cover sheet is going to auto-populate into the purchase contract for you. in my templates, I put in items I think I may need for a buyer's purchase. So I have the water heater and smoke because it's kind of gotten away from doing it because of the TDS. I have the receipt for reports. I have buyer's inspection waiver. I have for your protection, get a home inspection. I have an FHA and VA mandatory clause just in case they're going FHA or VA. I have my purchase contract. I have the buyer's inspection advisory. I have agent visual inspection for me. And I have our personal brokerage disclosures that we hand out. And then I have marketing conditions. I have lead-based paint, which we do not need because this was built in 2008. And then I have a septic and well inspection addendum, just in case the property has a septic and a well. This property does not, so I won't be using those items. So I'll just leave them there. In the meantime, I'm going to go click on my residential purchase agreement. And as you can see, I'll start at the top. Here's your disclosure of agency. It has auto-populated all the names. I just need to put a check mark in the box that these are the buyers. This is our agency disclosure. Then the next form would be possible representation. And this form, as you can see, has auto-populated the brokerage information, the broker's license, and I do have the buyer's names. Then we have our wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. So it's an advisory to your clients in regards to wire fraud and transfer of funds. And now we're on to the purchase contract. We have the date of the contract, the name of the buyer, the property address, the county in which it's located, the zip code, and the APN number. Our purchase price amount is already auto-populated because I put it on the cover sheet. So now I need to choose our closing date. I can either check mark here and put in an actual date, or I can check mark over here and put in days instead of an actual date. So what I'd say is 30 days from the date of acceptance. So once the offer is accepted, then we'll close within 30 days. And then confirmation, number B, is who's the agents representing which parties in the transaction. And as you can see, this is both. It's a dual agency. So I'm going to check mark here. Once I do that, it auto-populates and check marks in all others that it's a dual agency, and it does it for all of them. Okay? Now my client is going to put down a $5,000 deposit. You see that's there. Then they can do, the buyer shall deliver that deposit to escrow holder by electronic fund transfer, or you can check mark cashier's check, or you can check mark personal check, or you can check mark other and put something else in there if they're going to deliver it by mail or something if they're not local. Okay? The other option is number 2 here is to say that the buyer deposited with you, the agent, and gave you the deposit. So therefore, then you need to check mark that if they gave you the deposit. And then you need to write in who they made the deposit payable to. Okay, and then you need to show the seller proof of funds. The increased deposit you would put here. We're not going to increase the deposit. If this was an all cash offer, you would check mark right here. It's not an all cash offer. Buyer shall within 3 days after acceptance deliver to the seller such verification. And the verification would be their verification of their cash funds to close. Okay? And then we are going to have a loan. And you have to, if it's an FHA loan or a VA loan, you need to check mark either one of these boxes. If seller financing is what you're going after, then you would check mark this box. And then you're going to put the loan amount here. Okay, so my client is going to put down $250,000. All right. They're not going to have a second. They're not having any other terms to ask for the seller to pay for. So as you can see, we put down a $5,000 deposit. So the remaining amount they need to come in with is $245,000, and this does not include escrow fees or lender's fees. This is just their down payment. And then our total comes up to our purchase price amount, which is what you want. That has to equal. You go on to the next one, verification of down payment. Buyer is to give seller verification of their down payment. And in this case, it's $50,000, they need to show the seller that they have those funds necessary to close this transaction. Or you can click on verification attached, and you can attach it to your offer when the offer goes to the agent. The next line is your appraisal contingency. You have 17 days for your appraisal to be completed and back to your lender and the value to have come in. You can change this and say there is no contingency for appraisal, or you can shorten the days by putting a number here in this box. I recommend just keeping the 17 days. And then your loan terms, loan application within 3 days after acceptance, the buyer must have a loan approval letter. Well, in this day and age, you really should have the approval letter up front. So I recommend that you have the approval letter up front. But if you don't, this is your option. You have 3 days. If you do, you want to check mark this box that says letter attached and attach that approval letter with your offer when you send it out to the listing agent. The property is contingent on a loan at that point, and the contingency for a loan is 21 days, as you can see right here. We have 21 days. You also have the option to check mark here and put no loan contingency obtaining any loans specified above. So you can release those loan contingencies right off the bat if you choose to. I don't recommend it, but people do it. Then the buyer stated financing. If this buyer has stated financing from somewhere else and it's not a lending institution, then these are some guidelines that you can use there. Then the sale of the buyer's property. If the buyer has a property to sell, you need to check mark here. If you do, it's going to auto-populate the COP, which is the contingency for sale of buyer's property. And it'll auto-populate that into your platform so that you can use it with this offer. And you want to make sure you send it out with the offer. If this is going to be a backup, if you're going to do a septic, those types of things, these are here for you to check mark if it's a short sale and you're using a short sale addendum. Here's some other buyer and seller's advisory if this was a probate sale or a trust advisory, again a short sale information advisory. Buyer's investigation is already part of the contract and the purchase agreement, and that's why this is already check marked. You can also include the statewide buyers and sellers advisory, but the seller will probably send you one. If it's an REO property, you would check mark here, and if you check mark here, then it will auto-populate, as you see, an REO advisory for your client for you to use. Right here it says other terms. This is where you can put additional terms that the buyer would like, maybe from the seller to pay something, or you can put, buyer is aware the property is sold as is. This is open conversation here. You can pretty much put whatever you want in there that pertains to this contract. And then there's allegation of costs. So this is very important to determine who's paying for what. And that is up to you and your buyer. Your buyer and you need to have the conversation and determine who's going to pay for what items. So the natural hazard disclosure is already pre-printed here. I always have the seller, it's a statutory disclosure, seller to pay that with the environmental, and then put the company in which you want to use it. You have some extra blanks here you can type in for the buyer or seller to pay for a roof, a pest, a septic, a well. You can write those in here if you choose, but you also can use the SWPI, which is the septic and well inspection addendum. So you can use that rather than check mark here. And then you would check mark up here that you're going to include the septic and well with this offer. But you could do a roof, you can do any kind of reports you want. Maybe you want a perk test, maybe you want a well cleaning. You can do all that here. And then you scroll down, you got government retrofits. Seller shall pay for the smoke detector and carbon monoxide device to be installed in the property prior to close of escrow. The seller is not exempt from doing this according to the state of California. It is a requirement. The next two on number 2 under government requirements is government mandatory minimum and government compliance minimum mandatory retrofits. I'd never use it or check these, but you can if you choose to. You can check mark seller or buyer. I just know that the buyer is entitled to their inspections. They can do their inspections If something comes up that's a mandatory minimum retrofit in any one of these categories, you have every right to ask the seller within your 17 days of inspection to do any of those repairs. So this is kind of open-ended if you just check mark it to the seller, and most the time your offer wouldn't be accepted at that point due to that, or they would counter that out. So I kind of save the agent some time and I don't even mark them. But it's up to you. It's a personal preference. You need to talk with the buyer about it. The buyer gets to choose. Escrow and title company, it just depends on the offer. Customary in California is for the buyer to choose. So you can have the buyer choose, or you can go with the seller's choice. It's up to you. I like to choose. I put in buyer and seller to pay 50-50, and I choose the title company I would like to use. All right, and then it says the parties shall within 5 days after acceptance sign and return the escrow holder's general instructions. That's a new guideline that came out, so that has to be done by the title company. They'll send you the general provisions, and your client needs to complete those, and then they need to get back to the title company. And then you have title insurance. Title insurance is a item that is recommended to get, but is optional if you're not doing a loan. If you're doing a loan, then it's not optional. You have to have it. But I always pick the same title company. I always put buyer seller. Just depends on what county you're in. Customarily, it depends on the county. Some counties it's the seller pays the title. Some county it's buyers and sellers split it. And some counties it's the buyer pays it customarily. So you determine how you want to write it. Talk with your buyer. Your buyer has the right to choose how they want to present or check mark in this offer. So it's very important to be speaking with your buyer. Okay? And then the next one is the seller shall pay county or buyer shall pay county transfer tax. Now, you can either have the buyer or the seller pay it, or it can be split. I always check mark seller. It's up to you. If the city in which the property is located has a transfer tax, then you're going to want to check mark one of these. You need to find out. You can call your local title company and they can let you know. If the property has homeowners associations, you choose here on these next two lines who's paying for the HOA transfer and the HOA preparation of all the documents. It's already pre-done that the seller shall pay the HOA fees for preparing any documents required to be delivered by civil code. So these other items are optional. Buyer, seller, seller. You can split it. One pays it. Whatever you want to do. You need to talk with your buyer and see how they would like to handle that. I customarily put that the seller paid it, but it's up to your client what they would like to do. Then the next line would be number 7, which is if there's a private transfer tax, which is getting more and more popular, so you have to determine if the buyer and seller are going to pay it and if there is a private transfer tax within your area. And then these other two items are for additional whatever you want the seller to pay for. You can add that here and choose what you'd like the seller to pay for. Line 10, buyer seller shall pay for home warranty. I always put the buyer to pay, and then I put in, I write in paid by buyer's agent. So I do that as a gift to my clients. I always do the upgrade. I always do air conditioning. If it has a pool, you may want to add a pool. If you do, the home warranty is going to be much more costly than $500. So get with the home warranty companies, determine which one you'd like to use and what their costs are for the different plans. The next thing is if the buyer didn't want a home warranty, you would check mark here that they waive that right. Doesn't mean they can't in the middle of the transaction before it closes determine that they do want one. Then they can still get one. Okay, that's just to keep your offer clean. Check mark there. Items included and excluded from the property is your next category. These are items naturally anything affixated to the home. lights, plumbing, heating, ceiling fans, fireplace inserts, screens, windows, appliances, in-ground landscaping, shrubs, water purifiers, security systems, those types of things, mailboxes, they all stay with the home. But if you want the stove to stay with the home, you want to check mark that box. If they happen to have a refrigerator and washer and dryer and your client would like those to stay with the home, then you would check mark those boxes as well. It's your choice. The next line is for existing integrated phone and home automated systems, including necessary components. This basically says those devices also would stay with the home. The seller would give permission for them to use them. If there was any codes or passwords, they would give those items as well. This section talks about if there's any leases on the property, the seller must disclose those leases to the buyer and the terms of those leases once the offer has been accepted. Seller represents and includes in the purchase price, unless otherwise specified, are owned by the seller and shall be transferred to the buyer if there is items like a water softener that's there and may be owned, or a solar system that's there and already owned. But if it's leased, then the buyer has the right to determine whether they want to continue with the lease and keep those items there. Items to exclude from the property would be flat screen TVs that are mounted on walls. Those are still considered personal property, along with speakers and so forth, and mechanical devices that don't come with the home, like personal property of furnishings that aren't attached. Those things are excluded. But naturally, the buyer can put up here items to include. They can write in items of personal property if they would like them to be left. The next one is the brackets. So we all have TVs now that are being mounted on walls. This says that the brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings for any such components, furniture, or items shall remain with the property. So the brackets would remain, or the screws would remain with the property. Or you can put an X here that says will be removed in all the holes and damages will be patched but not painted. The next category, closing in possession. Buyer intends or does not intend to occupy the property. If they do not intend to occupy the property, you need to check mark this box. If you don't mark the box, then the buyer is going to occupy the property. Number B9 is seller, occupy, or vacant. Possessions shall be delivered to the buyer no later than 6 o'clock, already pre-written on the day it records. Or you can change it and put a different time. I usually put by 3 p.m. Okay, on the day it closes. Or no later than blank calendar days. Okay. 9C is if you're going to let the seller remain in possession. If you check mark the box and allow them to remain in possession, it's automatically going to auto-populate a seller remain in possession addendum. It's called the SIP, so that you can fill that out and send it accompanied with the offer for the seller to sign if you end up using that form. If there's a tenant, you can have the tenant to remain in possession if you want by check marking this form. If there's no tenant, then don't check mark that. Okay, but if you do mark that, there is a form that will upload automatically for you right here. It's called the tenant to remain in possession form. It's a TIP. Okay. This next item's number 10, the statutory disclosures. This is an advisory to the buyer to tell them what disclosures the buyers are required to do by law. Do you see that? So all these disclosures are required for the seller to do and give to the buyer by law, unless it's a bank-owned property or a trust sale, then they possibly can be exempt from these. Condo, planned unit development, so seller has 7 days, there it is right there, 7 days to get these disclosures, including a TDS, transfer disclosure statement, and a seller's property questionnaire to the buyer. Okay, and the buyer has 17 days to complete their inspections and do any and all investigations of the property. That's this next page. All right, the seller has to be able to give clear title to the buyer and pay off any liens or debts that are on the property so that the buyer can take it over clear of any of their debt. Buyer needs to remove contingencies within 17 days, and when they do remove those contingencies for these inspections and loan, contingencies would be 17 days for your inspection, 17 days for your appraisal. On the 18th day, they should be removing those. When and if they remove them, then they cannot cancel this contract for any of those items. Okay, and then on the 21st day, they have to remove their loan contingency. And when they remove that contingency, they should be removing all contingencies at that time. And once they do that, then they are locked into the contract and must purchase the property. If they don't, they're agreeing to give up their earnest money deposit to the seller for the breach of contract, basically, is what that would be if they did not go through and purchase it at that point. So that is pretty much the effect of the cancellation of their deposit if they have their contingencies already removed. Then you'll do a final verification with the buyer anytime within 5 days prior to close to make sure that any repairs or anything that was asked for has been completed, and to verify that the property is still in the same condition as when you wrote the offer or better. You need to explain to your buyers that property taxes will be prorated, so if the sellers have already paid their property taxes, it will be prorated from the time they take possession, and the sellers will get a credit back. Broker's compensation, typically the compensation is paid by a seller, and that's pretty much what you need to explain to your client. And then it explains the scope of duties and acknowledgments of the sellers, buyers, brokers, and who's representing who. And these are your joint escrow instructions. This is for the title company. They go through and pull out the sections they need, and it guides them where to go and what's important. And then this talks about your remedies if there was any conflict and liquidated damages. Talks about mediation and arbitration here. So you really want your buyers to initial here and here. It is optional, but it is advised that they do that. So you need to go over what mediation arbitration is. And if you don't already know that, you probably should read this paragraph and make sure that you understand it very well. So your clients will have 3 sections to initial here on this page, and then you can move on to the next page. So selection of service providers, multiple listing service, attorney's fees, all these 3 items are just disclosures to the buyer to let them know how and if they do inspections and they ask you to help them, that they have to hold you harmless, and that the property is in the Metro List services and on the internet, so it is being seen all over the world. And if anybody happens to take an action or arbitration or mediation against one another, whoever wins will get their attorney's fees if there's attorneys involved. Buyers shall not assign this contract. They're not allowed to. Without consent from the seller would have to agree. Equal housing opportunity when we do not discriminate as real estate agents. Terms and conditions of the offer is explained here to the buyer. Time is of the essence, and explains the importance of our time is of the essence. Our 17 days, our 21 days to the buyer. And then these are definitions of the terms in the contract. And it's really important that you know the definition of days. Days means calendar days. However, after acceptance, the last day for performance of any required by this agreement, like your contingencies or close of escrow, shall not include a Saturday, Sunday, or a legal holiday, and shall instead be the next business day. So that is a really, really important definition that you want to make sure you understand. It talks about how to deliver documents, electronic signatures, laws, repairs, and so forth. And as you can see, the offer expires 3 days from the date you wrote it at 5 p.m., or you can change it, which I do. I'm changing it to 5 p.m. on January 2nd. See that? And then your sellers or buyers would sign here. The sellers would initial there. This is the page 10 of the contract, last page. There's no place here for your buyers to sign, but you will sign here, and your buyers will initial down here that they have seen that page. The next one is the buyer inspection advisory, and this is just advising. It's a one-page document of what the buyer can inspect in regards to this property. Naturally, there's that 10-page document that has, or now it's 14 pages, of the statewide buyers and sellers advisory, that it is 14 pages of explaining to the buyer what they can inspect. There is no limit to what they can inspect. They can inspect anything they like. And you need to go through and read all this and make sure that you can explain it to your clients. With that is the purchase agreement in a nutshell. And I hope you enjoyed my little training video here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Advance One Professional Real Estate in Lodi on Kettleman Lane. And I look forward to talking to you soon.